community. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you all for joining us here today. For those joining us online, I'd invite you to acknowledge the land from where you're joining us today. If you wish to activate closed captions, please click on the CC icon at the bottom right of your screen. My name is Daniel O'Neill. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm the Manager, Equity, Diversity and Inclusion here at UNSW Canberra. To commence today's proceedings, it's my great honour to ask Auntie Violet Sheridan to welcome us all to country. Auntie Violet is a Ngunnawal elder with family from Yass, Cowra and Ngunnawal country. Auntie Violet is a very active member of the Canberra community and is also a director on the board of the Traditional Owners Aboriginal Corporation. Thank you, Auntie Violet.
Thank you so much, Carol. It's a pleasure. Well, thank you so much for having me this afternoon to perform a welcome. This is a passion for me. I have a granddaughter that's just come out to tell us that she was gay, and she was just a little bit scared. I think she was nervous, and I said to her, that doesn't make us love you any less. It actually makes us love you more because of who you are. It's about the person you are. You haven't changed. You're still the same. Her uncles love her to death. Her mother loves her to death, and I love her to death. We all love her. We actually all got together and just one big cuddle because we want her to be happy. We want her to be safe. We want her to be who she wants to be, not what we want her to be. And I love my granddaughter to death. I wouldn't want any other granddaughter except her. And I have 27 grandchildren now, 2 great grannies, and I love my baby to death. I wouldn't want her to be. I also had a cousin that when we grew up together, she wanted to be, and I thought she was a tomboy. That's what we put it down to. And but she wanted to be who she wanted to be. She got married, had a child, but she wasn't happy. She did that to please her family, but she wasn't happy at all. But now she is who she wants to be. She's Glenda, she's a gay woman, and we love her to death. But we used to go there sometimes and look in the cupboard, and all these trophies were there, and I was thinking, oh my God, Mervyn, you've won a lot of trophies. Then they said, no, I don't own no trophies, Glenda does. I'm so proud who my granddaughter is and who my cousin is. And I'm so proud of people that are scared to come out, but when they do, that we must accept them who they are, because they're still the same person. They're not monsters, but my granddaughter has a friend that she's a girl, but she wants to be a boy. She's not being accepted by her family, who she wants to be. She tried to commit suicide, but we has family. She's not family, she's not Aboriginal, but we support her for who she wants to be. I wouldn't want to be someone who I didn't want to be. So I support all those people that want to be who they want to be, and I wish them all the best and happiness, and God bless them. So every time a formal welcome to country is given, it continues a tradition that has always been a part of Aboriginal culture. It was always given by welcome when a different tribal area was visited. The reason for this custom is to protect your spirit while you were there, and it all shows respect for the First Peoples of the land you are meeting on. When we talk about traditional country, we mean something beyond the dictionary definition for the word Aboriginal Australians. We might mean homeland. We might mean tribal or clan areas. We might be more than just a place on the map. For us, country is all values, places, resources, stories and culture obligated with that area. And its features. It describes an entity of our ancestors' domains. It is on this land, possibly right here where we sit today, that my ancestors taught and raised their families. So I invite you all here to learn in this place, and remember that all before they decided to build Canberra, the capital city of Australia, that my people, the Ngunnawal people, have lived there for years and many years. I'd like to pay my respects to my elders, past, present and emerging, and extend that respect if there's any other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people present here today. I'd also like to acknowledge our Chief Minister, Andrew Barr, members of Alpha, ladies and gentlemen. Keeping in the general spirit of friendship and reconciliation, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you all here this afternoon on behalf of my people, the Ngunnawal people, who are the traditional owners of the land that we sit on today and that you live on. So I'm a big supporter of climate change, so please take care of this land, and God bless you all. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Auntie Violet. It was beautiful. International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, Interphobia and Transphobia, IDAHOBIT, celebrates LGBTQI+ people globally and raises awareness for the work still needed to combat discrimination, violence and prejudice against our communities. 31 years ago, on May 17, 1990, the World Health Organization removed homosexuality from the classification of diseases and related health problems. 31 years ago, I'd returned from backpacking around Europe with no direction and little clue. I signed up as a temp and secured a role within a publishing firm. Shortly afterwards, I was leading the dispatch team. Within a couple of months, I was promoted to a permanent management role by 2 of the 3 company directors. The 3rd managing director had been overseas. He returned the next day. And amongst the first things he did that morning was demote me. I was fired from the permanent role because I was apparently a little too gay to be client-facing. Now, that was by no means an uncommon story, and indeed not even a particularly bad story, certainly at the time. It was just the way things were, and there were plenty of worse things for our communities to worry about in those days. Sadly, for many people in this country and around the world, there still are. The 2 directors who promoted me both offered to stand with me and to accompany me if I chose to lodge a complaint with the Anti-Discrimination Board. And while my experience was central to the story, it's the 2 directors who were prepared to risk their own positions and their livelihoods who were the heroes. They were, in essence, true allies. And while they were being awesome, guess what I did? I thanked them both. I cleared my desk and I left. Things have changed remarkably for the better in this country in the years since. But what was true for me then is still true. Good employees will not stay where they are not respected, where they are not valued, and where they do not feel safe and empowered to be themselves. Now people are much more confident and much more demanding in their expectations of the workplace. And it is often seen as the sole responsibility of leadership to nurture the culture, to actively articulate who we are and who we aspire to be, and to ensure that every employee feels safe, supported and valued. But it is not only up to leadership. This is a shared responsibility. We are all active agents of cultural change, and we create our culture with every interaction every day. Today at UNSW Canberra, we are very lucky to have a leader who understands equity, who actively embraces diversity, and who is committed to facilitating meaningful inclusion. I'd like to invite our Acting Rector, Harvi Sidhu, to speak.
To start, a special thank you to all of you who have who are able to join us today, both on stage and off. Thank you, Auntie Violet, for joining the UNSW family for this event. And Daniel, thank you for sharing your personal story with us and for leading the IDAHOBIT event. IDAHOBIT has brought us all together today, which feels so unique following the unprecedented year we have endured together. Today, we come together as a community to recognize the history of discrimination and violence against sexually and gender diverse people in Australia and around the world. To celebrate the achievements for human rights to date and to affirm our shared commitment to actively stand against unlawful discrimination of any kind, which has no place here in our community at UNSW Canberra. UNSW actively aspires to be a global exemplar in equity, diversity, and inclusion. Daniel spoke about the Ally Network, which the university promotes with the aim of harnessing a culture of informed and committed allyship among students, employees, community, and business partners. I spent the first half of my life living overseas. When I was growing up, I witnessed discrimination, harassment, and threats of physical violence. This discrimination was often towards people I cared for, friends, relatives, other kids in my class, and teammates on the field. People being discriminated against for being themselves whilst going about their everyday lives. Intolerance can often be attributed to lack of education and lack of awareness. Your participation today supports the awareness of IDAHOBIT, a day dedicated to continuing the conversation about sexuality and gender, fostering a culture of community and inclusiveness. The responsibility to make sure the people around us feel supported belongs to all of us. At UNSW Canberra, we strive to educate future leaders, leaders that will work together to facilitate meaningful change. Your leadership begins as a student, supporting and sharing your own challenges with your peers, and continues into your career as you learn the importance of being a visible ally that will follow through with tangible outcomes. I want you to consider how we can each be more visible allies to one another as leaders in equity, diversity, and inclusion. Because when leaders are more visible allies, this creates safety and the opportunity for others to follow. Educate yourself. Sometimes leaders are afraid of saying the wrong things. Sometimes it feels easier to say nothing. However, doing nothing is not leadership. It is okay to make mistakes or to get your language wrong. If we acknowledge our mistakes as part of our learning, we will become better allies and leaders. Learn and be informed. Talk to your teams. Be humble and keep a learning mindset. Be sensitive to every individual's unique experiences and intersectional identities. Be an active listener. Be honest but thoughtful in your delivery. I'm so very proud to be here today to recognize and celebrate all our diversities. We are a leading educational institution. Our role is to further the intellectual edge of our students, and to do this as a supportive and collaborative community. We aim to provide our staff and students with the tools to make sure inclusion makes us successful together. Thank you all for coming today. Thank you to everyone behind the event, and of course, thank you to our guests. And with that, I'm very delighted to invite our first guest, the Chief Minister of the ACT, the Honourable Andrew Barr, to speak. Thanks, Andrew.
Well, thank you very much, Harvi, for that very kind introduction. Dao Nona Dao Ngunnawal, the language of the Ngunnawal people. This is Ngunnawal country, and I extend my gratitude to you, Auntie Violet, for your wonderful welcome to country and your acknowledgement of the massive contribution the Ngunnawal people have made to our region. And on a personal note, sharing your story about your own family. If only every family responded in that way, we would be a much better community and society. So it would. So thank you, and I pay my respects to Ngunnawal elders past, present and emerging. And can I thank UNSW Canberra for the very kind invitation to say a few words today. IDAHOBIT Day is an important international day, and it's a day locally where principally we can celebrate progress and success, but also sharpen our focus on what remains to be done in our city and in our nation. As we've heard, it's been quite a journey over the last 3 decades. And the experiences that people of my generation, growing up in the 80s and 90s, compared to this generation of younger Canberrans, is quite a contrast. And a lot of progress has been made. A lot has been achieved, and there is much to celebrate today. But in acknowledging all of that progress, we must also reflect upon the journey ahead. And events like today, and organisations looking internally at how they can contribute to a better city, better society, a better nation, a better world, are important opportunities and events, and today is one such example. So I reflect on my own personal journey. I acknowledge what a supportive community I live in, but it wasn't always that way. We all have a tendency to look to our own personal experiences, to view markers of progress. And I reflect that as a high school student in Canberra, as a college and university student here, I didn't feel comfortable coming out. And I waited until after my university days. I'd like to think that at institutions like UNSW Canberra, and indeed all of our universities across this city, with the support of university leadership, with strong peer-led support amongst the student body, that if I were at this institution now, I would feel comfortable to be who I am. And I would hope that that is a marker of progress, not just for UNSW Canberra, not just for Canberra, but Australia. Now, we have a very simple objective for our city, and that is to be the most LGBTIQ plus friendly city in Australia. And we can achieve that through legislation, we can achieve that through policy and programs, but we will cement it through our whole community embracing that change. But it does need to be led by government and enabled by government. Now, there's a very strong view, an experience that I would want to share with you today. That we are where we are because of that leadership, but that we'll only get to where we want to be ultimately when that is embraced more broadly across the community. So the opportunity today is to talk to a broader audience, to engage with more people. And I think if we learned anything out of the marriage equality process, the long and torturous process to reach marriage equality in this country, it was that change is achieved through millions and millions of conversations, of people talking to each other, of understanding each other, and overcoming the fear of what you may not immediately know or understand. And it's only through that engagement that we can change an entire society. But on a day like today, I think it is important to reflect on how far we have come. The US civil rights activist Martin Luther King, I'm paraphrasing him here a little, but said the arc of history can be slow, but it bends towards justice. And I think we can make the same observation about social inclusion and progress for LGBTIQ+ Australians. Sadly though, in an international perspective, there are many places in the world where an event like this simply would not be possible, or where their legal systems, their political leaders and their societies lag well behind Australia and indeed many of the most progressive nations in the world. So whilst I think it is important to celebrate today, it's important also to acknowledge that there is still a long journey ahead. Now, as part of that, the ACT government wants to play a constructive and enabling role. Through our Capital of Equality grants program, we support a wide range of community organisations to support the most vulnerable, to be visible and to engage. We also have a Ministerial Advisory Council and we encourage people from all walks of life to be involved in this journey. I want to thank UNSW Canberra for the opportunity to say a few words today and to thank you all for being here. Everyone who's joining us online, thank you very much. Happy IDAHOBIT Day, and let's continue to make progress together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chief Minister, and thank you for your leadership and all your support in LGBTI inclusion nationally. I'd now like to invite Hugh Hutchison to come up and say a few words for us. Midshipman Hugh Hutchison is a training officer here at ADFA, currently in his third year, studying a Bachelor of Computing and Cyber Security. Hugh is a trans man who spends his spare time advocating for LGBTIQ+ defence personnel by conducting awareness briefs across the ADF. He is particularly interested in the positive effect that a diverse and inclusive workforce has on defence capability. Thank you, Hugh.
So today I'd like to talk about my experience with internalized transphobia. Widespread discrimination contributes to a national culture of exclusion and even violence towards trans and gender non-conforming individuals, with anti-trans hate crimes on the rise. Immersed in this culture on a daily basis, it's no wonder that some transgender non-conforming people struggle with internalized transphobia. Internalized transphobia takes hold when people unconsciously absorb messages that shame, criticise and dehumanise trans people. Overt and subtle messages that degrade or serve to exclude trans people from full participation in life are especially harmful. Internalized transphobia isn't something that's innate in transgender non-conforming individuals. It's fueled by our society and the signals it sends to the trans community. These signals don't just come from the current political climate. Heteronormative and cisnormative pop culture and systemic and institutional practices establish ideals that rarely reflect transgender non-conforming experiences, but instead provide limited depictions of how people should identify, look, and behave. From an early age, my family reinforced traditional gender roles and often acted as a regulatory authority over my budding gender identity and expression. Consciously or not, my parents expected me to love playing with dolls or wearing pink. Narrow and arbitrary ideas about acceptable gender norms are widely and automatically enforced from the moment a child's born. For children who struggle with gender expression and identity, Parental and family rigidity serves not only to regulate the child's development, but it can also contribute profoundly to a child internalizing transphobic beliefs that may haunt them as they grow into adulthood and beyond. Schools, churches, and community organisations also play major roles in perpetuating gender norms and transmitting transphobic messages that can be internalised. The younger the child, the more susceptible they are to internalising these messages. And in my case, this was within the Mormon Church. Escaping or stopping such victimisation is crucial, but resulting psychic scars can be hard to overcome and may live on in a silent but often destructive internalised form. It's important to note that people who don't identify as transgender non-conforming also experience internalised transphobia because of our culture's rigid gender norms, and it may be holding you back in your own personal development and relationships. You don't necessarily have to identify as trans or be questioning your gender to do the important work of uncovering gender beliefs and biases. It's helpful for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hugh. Now I'd like to invite Beth Kerrison to join us on stage. Beth has worked in enterprise risk management, performance audit, corporate and academic governance for the last 15 years. She's a former member of the Management Committee for Diversity ACT and is on the ANU LGBTIQ+ Alumni Committee. Beth is also the chair of the Pinnacle Foundation here in the ACT. Thank you, Beth.
Great. Thank you, Daniel. And my thanks to the other speakers this morning. The observations and experiences of people never fail to resonate and touch me, and I am always so impressed by the generosity of people to share their experiences. So I do thank you for that. I also thank Auntie Violet for that wonderful welcome to country, and stand with you and say always was, always will be Aboriginal land. And thank you for coming out today. Not coming out today. Coming here today. Sorry. Okay. I always make that one gaffe just at the start of every speech. I don't know how I do that, but anyway. All right, a few years back, I was invited to join the University of Canberra Ally Network, and as part of that work, we established and aged and matured a network there that sat within the bounds of management and within the student community both. And my motivation in joining that was the stories and the realities of international students, and the fact that many of our students will come here and experience inclusive and warm attitudes, but they will go home to a very different landscape. And I wanted to give them a network of sorts that they could reach back to us if they needed to. And as part of that work, a colleague said to me, why don't you come along to Pinnacle Foundation? And I had no idea what the Pinnacle Foundation was. And so I heard that it was to help Australian children or Australian youth that experience discrimination. And I sort of thought back to when was the first time I consciously noticed discrimination, and it was probably in my Catholic primary school when the nuns would just tie behind the left hand of a child who did not naturally write with their right hand and insist that they wrote right-handed. And I thought that we're past those days and that discrimination had been sort of put to the side with legislation and with more tolerant attitudes. But I was surprised to learn that youth today in Australia still face this, and sometimes from within their own families. So I went along somewhat sceptically to a Pinnacle Foundation scholar event, and I can tell you my inner rural economic rationalist was a bit triggered when I was asked to make a donation to attend. I thought, well, how can this be if we're in this first world country? Surely we've got more than enough support. They don't need my $50 to come along tonight. But I was introduced to Pinnacle, and I found that they were established in 2007, and they were based on the American model of the Point Foundation, which does very similar work. And they offer multi-year scholarships to students aged in the 18 to 26 age brackets to help them study, whether it's at a vocational level, within the arts, or at the tertiary level. And, you know, I was there mingling and meeting people and still not terribly convinced when the more formal part of the evening came and a Pinnacle scholar rose to speak. And his story, a lot of his story is on the Pinnacle website, as are the stories of many of the scholars, and I'd invite you to go onto Pinnacle's website and have a look and see these impressive, amazing folk that sit among us. But when he spoke, he had this powerful story of abuse at the hands of his own family, and he spoke of daily beatings. It was a Christian family, and they held the view that they could convert their son. After a sustained campaign, they called a meeting when he was in Year 12 to tell him they were going to lay off him this year so he could get the grades he needed and get out of the house. There are so many scholars, but I'm telling you about this story because this scholar went to UNSW. He applied for law and he was accepted. But before the HSC marks were out, he had applied for accommodation and hopeful of getting a place there because he knew he no longer had his family home. Once the results were out and the family knew he'd done well enough to leave, they asked him to leave. And so it was between Christmas and New Year, and he made a call to UNSW to see if he could move into accommodation. And he said that night, by rights, no one should have answered the phone, but one person did. And by rights, he should have been told, look, sorry, I can't help you because of the time of year. But that wasn't what he was told. And he should not have been offered refuge maybe at this time. But there was an amazingly decent human who saw the genuine need and saved that 18-year-old in many ways. So this scholar found his way to the Queer Collective at UNSW, which had information about Pinnacle, and he applied to the Pinnacle Foundation, and he was assigned a mentor, and the mentor program is so powerful because it gives you someone who works in your profession, who has lived your experience and can guide you in ways that possibly your own family or your circle of friends are not able to. I can tell you, my partner and I went home and we workshopped that story for about a week. We couldn't believe that that was a real story in modern day Australia. And I feel emotional telling you that story today. But as a result, I joined Pinnacle, and I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to tell you a little bit about Pinnacle today, and tell you that, because everyone's data driven, I've got some stats for you, that 95% of Pinnacle scholars say that it simply improved their confidence. It gave them a better outlook. It told them more about themselves and it validated who they were. 93 of them just felt more valued as a person. It helped them find their humanity. And 98% of them felt academically supported. And I think being in universities, we're all impressed to hear that of any of our students. When the founders were asked what their hopes for the future of Pinnacle were, each agreed it was that the Pinnacle Foundation would no longer be needed. They'd like to see a day when Pinnacle outlives itself and that every young person in Australia is treated on an equal footing, has equal opportunity and has equal support to reach their full potential. And while this might not be possible in the time of the founders, I think we should absolutely live up to that ambition and that optimism that they hold. And I thank Andrew Barr and his government for the work they've done in abolishing discrimination, at least here in the ACT. And to let you know that Pinnacle has no government support. It relies solely on the donations of people. It has 140 volunteers across Australia, and if you're interested in volunteering, I'd be really pleased to spend some time telling you about it. It has a full-time equivalent staff of under 3 to deliver the program, and so it's a pretty lean organisation. But the important thing is it gives the gift of education, and we know the impact of that. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Beth. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce leading aircraftswoman Bonnie Doyle. Bonnie is an air intelligence analyst for Maritime Water Command in support of Joint Agency Task Force JFT 639 and Operation Overarch. Bonnie is a member of DEFGLIS, Defence LGBTI Information Service Board of Directors. She identifies as lesbian and actively supports LGBTI personnel, particularly women and enlisted members, through visibility, inspiration and action to create a more inclusive, diverse and capable Defence Force. Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody here, for just turning up. Thank you so much for the organisation of this whole event. This is the first ever IDAHOBIT event I've ever attended where I didn't have to organise it myself. So already for me, that's a huge marker of progress. As mentioned, I am on the board of directors of DEFGLIS. DEFGLIS is Defence LGBTI Information Service. I'm also a coordinator of an Air Force Women's Integrated Network, a committee member of the RAF Alpine Snow Sports Association, and the last time we ran the event, I was also the women's ski captain, and it was the first time that we won in 20 years. I'm in my second year of a psychology degree. I play viola. Before I joined Defence, I was also a sommelier and a dog groomer. I'm an avid mountain biker, hiker, and yes, I also identify as lesbian. Now, I say all this not to brag, but to highlight that I am a strong, highly capable, multi-dimensional person with a wide range of skills and interests, just like all of you here. My sexuality is one tiny aspect about my life, and yet so often I'm reduced to it. I'm not the two-dimensional side character you might see on a Netflix show whose sole purpose is to provide comic relief or ratings. It gets frustrating when someone asks me about my weekend and the only thing they hear me say is me mention my girlfriend, because I'm so much more than that. Homophobia, transphobia, biphobia, intersex phobia can be obvious, but more often than not, it's subtle. It's little comments that in isolation aren't big enough to make a deal about, but they're like tiny rocks that chip away at your armour, your confidence and your self-worth. When the rock attacks come in thick and fast, we don't get enough time to repaint and repair, and doubt seeps in, and you start getting that internal voice saying horrible things like, "You don't belong here." So this is where allies can come in. Now, a lot of people think that they're allies. So I'll bring up an example of someone who thought they were an ally. So the first IDAHOBIT event I organised, a warrant officer stood up to say a few words. Proud as punch he was. "I don't care what you do on the weekend. That's your own business, as long as you're here to put in work when you're here." Now his intentions were good, but Monday morning at any workplace all around Australia, the most commonly asked question is, of course, what did you get up to on the weekend? Because people do care. And everyone should feel comfortable to share their story. It builds trust, and trust is the foundation for respect, perceived integrity and teamwork. Not being able to share your story automatically puts you out to the outside. I want to see a workplace where no one is hesitant about talking about their weekend, where no one is hesitant to put photos of their loved ones on their desk. So what can we do about this? How can we be a real ally? Real allies are important because they set the standard of language used in the workplace. The voice of an ally, particularly one from a leadership role, can often be more powerful for LGBTI people and for people that might not recognise the value of inclusion. I can throw all the statistics to you, but the bottom line is that inclusion delivers money, delivers retention, delivers innovation, greater coordination, and delivers results. Diversity is getting all the different people into a room, but inclusion is unlocking those people's potential. So to be a great ally involves three things: education, visibility, and action. The biggest barrier for entry for an ally is the fear of making a mistake. The best way to overcome this is education. The more you read and learn, the more you can apply your language in the workplace. Give it a go. Failure is a learning opportunity. Visibility is role models. If you identify as diverse sex, sexuality, or gender, be out and be proud. We don't see enough out and visible role models in defence, especially at the sergeant to warrant officer level and wing commander and up. It's hard to be what you can't see. And it's critical that we have people that we can identify with in positions of leadership. It gives us hope, which is a higher level need and essential to achieve excellence. Visibility is also your corporate rainbow badges and flags. It's putting pronouns in your signature block. It's letting people know through visible cues that you are accepting and open for conversations. But it's not initiating those conversations. And so this is where action comes into play. Action is the hardest but most powerful thing you can do as an ally. As I mentioned earlier, this is the first IDAHOBIT event that I've ever attended that I didn't have to organise. If you have taken the effort to educate, it will show through your actions. Even if you do get it a little wrong, it allows for further learning. It really will mean the world to the LGBTI people in your unit. Organise an IDAHOBIT event and ask for volunteers. March at Mardi Gras and get to know LGBTI people and understand the barriers that they face. Correct behaviour that doesn't align with our values. These actions demonstrate courage, and courage is inspirational and contagious. Inclusion requires allies because we can't do it alone. To be a memorable leader and create a legacy of inclusion. Create an event in your workplace with the hope that someone else will want to organise it next year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bonnie. That was brilliant. And thank you all here in person and everyone online for your attention and your engagement today. Please remember, we are all active agents of change and we can all be effective allies. Let's celebrate our differences together, learn from each other, be upstanding, be outspoken, and let's all lead in inclusion. I'd like to pay special thanks to everyone who helped bring this together today. The Chief Minister, Harvi, Auntie Violet, thank you so much. Hugh, Bonnie, and to Nathan in absentia. To Beth, thank you. To the fabulous CMU team and to all our volunteers. To Holly, to Leanne and to Tria, thank you all. Heartfelt gratitude to Jen and Annabelle, who deftly picked this ball up and ran with it with very, very little notice, in addition to everything else they do. Thank you all for joining us online, and to all of you here, I'd invite you all to join us now in the foyer for some lunch. Thank you. And lastly, can we all put our hands together for Cherie, who has done an enormously good job.